The Xal'thor's High Command had conquered 47 species across 6 spiral arms of the galaxy. Their methodology was perfected over 12,000 years of expansion, a formula so reliable it had become doctrine, inscribed in the sacred texts of their military academies.
First, they would announce their presence. Then, they would demonstrate overwhelming force by obliterating a single population center. Finally, they would issue demands for unconditional surrender. The mathematics were simple. No species wished to die. Self-preservation was the universe's first law, transcending biology, transcending culture, transcending everything.
Fleet Commander Vorthax stood on the observation deck of the Eternal Dominion, flagship of the 6th Conquest Fleet, watching the blue marble rotate slowly below. Earth, the humans called it. Such a fragile name for such a fragile world.
"Status report," Vorthax commanded, his 4 crystalline eyes reflecting the planet's azure glow. Sub-Commander Xal'thor's appendages danced across the holographic interface. "All 3,000 vessels are in position, Fleet Commander. The humans have detected us. Their primitive communication networks are flooding with activity. Fear, mostly. Confusion, exactly as predicted."
Vorthax allowed himself a rare expression of satisfaction, his mandibles clicking softly. And their military response?
They've mobilized what passes for a planetary defense force, chemical propulsion rockets, fission-based warheads, some crude directed energy systems, nothing that could penetrate even our tertiary shields. Xal'thor's tone dripped with contempt. They are infants, Fleet Commander, barely capable of reaching their own satellite.
"Excellent. Prepare the demonstration." The Xal'thor had selected Sydney, Australia, for their demonstration of power. A city of 5 million souls, large enough to be significant, small enough to be considered merciful. The concentrated plasma beam from the Eternal Dominion would reduce it to glass and ash in approximately 3.7 seconds.
As the weapons array hummed to life, charging with enough energy to crack a small moon, Vorthax activated the Universal Broadcast System. His words would be translated into every human language simultaneously, appearing on every screen, every speaker, every communication device on the planet.
"Creatures of Earth," his voice boomed across continents. "I am Fleet Commander Vorthax of the Xal'thor's hegemony. Your planet has been selected for incorporation into our empire. Resistance is not merely futile, it is illogical. We have conquered species far more advanced than your own. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your technology is primitive beyond comprehension. In precisely 1 standard rotation, you will surrender your world unconditionally or face systematic extermination."
He paused, savoring the moment. "To demonstrate the consequences of defiance. Observe." The plasma beam descended from orbit like the finger of an angry god. Sydney vanished. Where 5 million humans had lived their lives, loving, laughing, dreaming of futures they would never see, there was now only a crater of molten glass, glowing orange against the Australian night. Vorthax watched the human satellites capture the destruction and broadcast it across their world. He watched their communication networks explode with grief and terror. He watched their military forces scramble in helpless confusion. "Perfect," he whispered. "They will surrender within hours. They always do."
He retired to his quarters, confident that by morning, Earth would belong to the hegemony.
He was about to learn why the Xal'thor had never before encountered a species quite like humanity. The emergency session of the United Nations Security Council convened in New York at 3:47 a.m. Eastern Time. The Secretary General, Elena Vazquez, stood before the assembled representatives of Earth's nations, her face ashen but her voice steady.
"Sydney is gone," she said simply.
5 million people, vaporized in less than 4 seconds.
The chamber was silent. Some representatives wept openly. Others sat in stunned paralysis.
A few stared at their phones, desperately trying to reach loved ones who would never answer.
The aliens have given us 24 hours to surrender unconditionally, Vasquez continued. They claim they've conquered 47 species. They claim resistance is impossible. She paused, looking around the room. The question before this body is simple. Do we surrender?
For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, slowly, the representative from Ireland stood.
My grandfather fought in the Easter Rising, he said quietly. He was 17 years old. The British Empire controlled a quarter of the world's landmass. They had the most powerful navy on Earth. They had machine guns and artillery and an army of millions. My grandfather had a rifle and a dream of freedom. He paused. He didn't surrender then. I won't surrender now.
The representative from Nigeria rose next. My grandmother walked barefoot through the Biafran War. She buried 3 of her children and kept walking. She didn't surrender then. Neither will I.
One by one, they stood. The representative from Japan spoke of Okinawa, of grandpans who had rebuilt cities from nuclear ashes. The representative of Russia spoke of Stalingrad, of ancestors who had eaten rats and shoe leather rather than yield an inch to invaders. The representative of Israel spoke of Masada and Warsaw. The representative of Vietnam spoke of tunnels dug by hand, of farmers who had defeated the world's mightiest military.
The representative from Poland spoke of the Warsaw Uprising. The representative from Finland spoke of the Winter War.
And then the representative from the United States stood, an elderly woman whose grandfather had stormed the beaches of Normandy.
47 species, she said, her voice trembling with something that was not fear. 47 species, and not one of them told these bastards to go to hell. She looked around the chamber, at the faces of delegates from every corner of Earth. Maybe that's because none of those species were human.
The vote was unanimous.
Earth would not surrender.
Vorthax woke to alarms and the panicked voice of Sub-Commander Xal'thor.
Fleet Commander, the humans, they're not responding correctly.
Vorthax emerged onto the command deck, his crystalline eyes narrowing at the chaos displayed on the tactical screens. Explain.
They've rejected surrender, sir. All of them. Every nation-state, every governing body, every organized human collective on the planet. They're broadcasting a unified response.
The message appeared on the main view screen. It was simple, a single word, transmitted from Earth in every known language and format.
No.
Vorthax stared at the screen for a long moment, certain there had been some translation error. That's impossible. Show me their military movements. They must be using this as a distraction while they prepare a surrender party.
Xal'thor's appendages trembled as he pulled up the tactical data. They're not preparing to surrender, Fleet Commander. They're preparing to fight.
The holographic display showed Earth's surface alive with activity. Missile silos were opening across continents. Aircraft were scrambling from every airbase on the planet. Naval vessels were putting to sea. And strangest of all, civilian vehicles were flooding the roads, not fleeing from military installations, but toward them.
They're mobilizing, Xal'thor whispered, his voice tinged with disbelief. Fleet Commander, they're actually mobilizing for war. Against us.
Vorthax felt a strange sensation, something unfamiliar, something he hadn't experienced in centuries of conquest. It took him a moment to identify it.
Uncertainty.
This is aberrant behavior, he said slowly. They witnessed Sydney's destruction. They understand they cannot win. What logical species would choose extinction over survival?
Perhaps they don't believe we'll actually destroy them, Xal'thor suggested. Perhaps they think we're bluffing?
Vorthax considered this. Then we must demonstrate that we are not. Target their next largest city. Show them we are prepared to continue until there is nothing left.
The second plasma beam descended on Los Angeles. 8 million more humans died in an instant. And then
Vorthax waited for the surrender that was surely coming.
Instead, Earth's response was a coordinated launch of every nuclear weapon on the planet, not at each other, as the Xal'thorics had observed primitive species do in times of crisis, but directly at the invasion fleet.
Xal'thor actually laughed. They're firing nuclear weapons at us? At our ships? Fleet Commander, our shields can withstand the surface temperature of a star. Their primitive explosives won't even scratch our...
He stopped mid-sentence as the tactical display began flashing warnings.
What is it? Vorthax demanded.
The missiles, sir. They're not heading for our fleet. Xal'thor's voice had lost all trace of amusement. They've launched over 1,200 nuclear warheads, and they're all heading for different targets. They're targeting their own planet.
Vorthax leaned forward, uncomprehending. What? They're launching nuclear weapons at their own cities, sir. At their own infrastructure. At their own industrial centers. At everything of value on their world. Xal'thor looked up, his eyes wide. Fleet Commander, they're destroying everything we came here to take. General Marcus Chen stood in the command bunker beneath Cheyenne Mountain, watching the missile tracks arc across the globe on the tactical display. His daughter had been in Sydney. His grandchildren, gone in an instant of alien fire.
The phone beside him rang. He answered it. General Chen, this is President Martinez. I need confirmation that Operation Charlemagne is proceeding as planned.
Confirmed, Madam President. All primary industrial targets will be eliminated within the hour. All secondary targets within 6 hours. We've coordinated with Russia, China, and the European Union. The nuclear arsenals are being distributed according to protocol.
There was a pause on the line. Marcus, are we doing the right thing?
Chen looked at the display, at the thousands of warheads racing toward their targets. They were about to destroy civilization. Cities that had taken centuries to build would cease to exist. Infrastructure that represented humanity's greatest achievements would be reduced to radioactive rubble.
Madam President, there's a story from Chinese history. During the Three Kingdoms period, a general named Shang Yu crossed a river to attack a larger force. After his army landed, he burned his own boats and smashed his cooking pots. His men knew they could not retreat. They could not wait for supplies. Their only choices were victory or death.
Did they win?
They won. Chen's voice hardened. The aliens want our planet. They want our resources, our technology, our infrastructure. They want us as slaves or specimens. We're about to make sure they get nothing. If we can't have our world, neither can they.
The president was silent for a long moment. God forgive us.
God might. I won't ask the aliens to.
Across the planet, mushroom clouds began to rise over humanity's greatest cities. But they were not random acts of desperation. They were carefully calculated sacrifices. Every target had been selected to maximize the denial of resources to the invaders while preserving key military installations, population centers in defensible terrain, and the raw materials necessary for the next phase of the plan.
Because humanity wasn't just destroying its own civilization.
It was preparing for guerrilla war.
Vorthax stood on the observation deck, watching the blue planet below transform into a patchwork of fire and ash. The humans had done this to themselves. They had destroyed their own cities rather than let them be conquered. He had lived for 4,000 years. He had conquered 17 worlds personally. He had seen species beg, bargain, and plead. He had seen them attempt futile resistance. He had even seen a few choose mass suicide rather than submit. But he had never seen a species systematically destroy its own civilization while simultaneously preparing for continued warfare.
Fleet Commander, Xal'thor said, his voice subdued. Our analysts have completed their review of human historical records.
Banned?
Sir, this species, they are not like the others. They have a documented history of what they call scorched earth tactics. During a conflict they call World War II, a nation called the Soviet Union retreated from an invasion by destroying everything of value in their own territory. The invaders advanced through nothing but ruins and corpses. They stretched their supply lines, they weakened themselves, and then the defenders counterattacked.
That was against invaders of similar technological level, Vorthax said dismissively. We are not their equals. We are their gods.
Perhaps, Fleet Commander, but there's more. Xal'thor hesitated. Human history is extensive and violent. They have fought each other continuously for their entire recorded existence. They have developed thousands of strategies and tactics for warfare. They have a concept called asymmetric warfare, the idea that a weaker force can defeat a stronger one through unconventional means.
Impossible. Superior firepower wins wars. It is mathematical certainty.
The humans don't seem to agree, sir. Their records show numerous examples of technologically inferior forces defeating superior ones. A nation called Vietnam defeated a superpower. A collection of primitive tribes called Afghanistan has defeated two separate superpowers. They have words for this: guerrilla warfare, insurgency, resistance. They have manuals for it. They teach it in their military academies.
Vorthax felt that unfamiliar sensation again, that uncertainty. What are you suggesting, Sub-Commander?
I'm suggesting that we may have made a fundamental error in our assessment of this species, Fleet Commander. We assumed they would behave logically, that they would surrender when faced with overwhelming force, but they don't seem to think the way we do. They don't seem to calculate their chances the way we do.
Then how do they think? Xal'thor pulled up a human text on the view screen. It was a quote from something called The Art of War, written by a human named Sun Tzu over 2,000 years ago.
If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle.
Fleet Commander, Xal'thor said quietly, I don't think we know this enemy at all.
Lieutenant Commander Sarah Wells crouched in the ruins of what had once been Denver, Colorado. The nuclear device had been a small one, just enough to destroy the city center and deny the aliens a foothold. The suburbs remained, transformed into a maze of rubble and shadow, perfect for guerrilla operations.
Her squad of 12 soldiers was all that remained of the 4th Infantry Division. The others had died in the first days of the invasion, when the aliens had landed ground forces to secure the wreckage of human civilization. They had expected no resistance. They had been wrong.
Movement. 2 o'clock, whispered Private Torres, gesturing toward the ruins of a collapsed shopping mall.
Wells raised her binoculars. Through the smoke and dust, she could see them, a squad of Xal'thor soldiers, their crystalline bodies glittering faintly in the dim light. They moved with the confidence of conquerors, weapons held casually, not bothering to check corners or cover.
Count? She asked.
12. Standard patrol formation. Same as always. Wells allowed herself a grim smile. They never learn.
The Xal'thor had superior technology, superior weapons, superior shields. Their personal energy barriers could stop small arms fire indefinitely. Their plasma rifles could vaporize a human instantly. One-on-one, a Xal'thor soldier was worth 100 humans.
But the Xal'thor had never fought humans before.
Torres, set the charges. Mitchell, get the launcher ready. Everyone else, on my signal.
They had discovered early that while Xal'thor's shields could stop bullets, they couldn't stop the rubble of a collapsing building. And while a Xal'thor soldier could vaporize a human at 300 meters, that same soldier couldn't do much when buried under 10 tons of concrete.
The Xal'thor's patrol entered the kill zone. Torres pressed the detonator. The carefully weakened support columns of a parking structure gave way, and the entire building came down on top of the alien squad.
Before the dust settled, Mitchell was up with the launcher, a modified construction tool firing rebar at supersonic speeds. The crystalline bodies of the Xal'thor, exposed where the rebel had stripped away their shield emitters, shattered like glass under the impacts.
"Move, move, move!" Wells shouted. They had 30 seconds, maybe less, before Xal'thor's reinforcements arrived. They disappeared into the tunnel system. Denver's old storm drains expanded and reinforced in the weeks since the invasion.
As she ran, Wells thought about the war. 3 months now since Sydney. 3 months since the aliens had landed. 3 months since they had expected humanity to simply give up.
They had taken the cities, what remained of them. They controlled the skies. They controlled the major transportation routes. On paper, they had won.
But every day their soldiers died. Every day their convoys were ambushed. Every day the resistance grew stronger.
The aliens still didn't understand. They kept expecting the humans to give up, to accept their defeat, to surrender.
They still didn't realize that humanity would never stop fighting. Not ever. Not until the last human being was dead. And even then, they'd probably find a way to fight from beyond the grave out of sheer spite.
Vorthax looked at the casualty reports and felt something he hadn't experienced in millennia of warfare.
Fear.
In 3 months, the ground forces had suffered 30,000 casualties, 30,000 Xal'thor soldiers, each worth 100 human warriors, killed by a species that should have been helpless.
The humans fought in ways the Xal'thor had never encountered. They attacked from tunnels and disappeared before counterattack. They rigged their own cities with explosives and buried Xal'thor's patrols under avalanches of debris. They used primitive chemical weapons, modified industrial compounds that bypassed Xal'thor's environmental suits. They staged fake surrenders and detonated themselves when Xal'thor's soldiers approached to take prisoners.
They were insane. All of them. Completely, utterly insane.
Fleet Commander, Subcommander Xal'thor reported, "We've received word from the Hegemony High Council. They're concerned about the progress of this conquest."
"What do they expect me to do?" Vorthax demanded. "The humans won't fight conventionally. They won't surrender. They won't even negotiate. Every time we kill 1,000 of them, 10,000 more take their place. It's like trying to stop a river by removing water 1 drop at a time."
The Council suggests we may have underestimated the complexity of the operation. They're recommending a change in strategy.
What strategy? We've tried everything. Superior firepower, targeted assassination of leaders, destruction of population centers, offers of conditional surrender. Nothing works. Their leaders hide in bunkers and broadcast instructions over primitive radio waves. Their population centers are already destroyed, and they reject every offer of surrender without even responding.
The Council has authorized the use of the cleansing protocol, Fleet Commander.
Vorthax stopped cold. The cleansing protocol was the hegemony's last resort, the complete biological sterilization of a planet. No species had ever pushed the hegemony to that point. The resources lost would be enormous. The shame would be unprecedented.
They want us to exterminate them completely?
The Council believes it may be the only option, sir. The humans are toxic. They're inspiring other conquered species. Word has spread through the slave networks about a species that refused to surrender, that fought back, that made the hegemony bleed. There have been uprisings on 3 worlds in the past month. If we don't eliminate the humans completely, we may face a general rebellion.
Vorthax thought about this. The humans had to die, all of them. Not just for this world, but for the stability of the entire hegemony. They were too dangerous to exist.
"Begin preparations for the cleansing protocol," he ordered. "We will turn this planet into a dead rock."
Yes, Fleet Commander.
But even as he gave the order, Vorthax couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something. The humans had been several steps ahead of them since the beginning. They had anticipated the invasion, prepared their defenses, organized their resistance. They had known what was coming and had planned accordingly.
What else had they planned for?
Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a bunker that had been under construction since the first alien signals were detected 5 years ago, General Chen reviewed the status reports with grim satisfaction.
The Exodus ships? He asked. All 12 launched successfully during the initial chaos, reported Colonel Davis. They're currently in transit to the Kuiper Belt, engines dark, following the planned trajectories. The aliens haven't detected them.
The gene banks? Secured in the Antarctic facility, the ice cover is masking them from orbital sensors.
The orbital network? 90% deployed. The satellites are disguised as debris from our own nuclear strikes. The aliens have been ignoring them.
Davis hesitated. Sir, the project we're not sure it will work. The science is theoretical at best. We're basing everything on fragments of data we intercepted from their communications.
It will work, Chen said quietly, because it has to.
3 years ago, before the Xal'thorics had even announced their presence, a team of astronomers had detected anomalous signals from deep space. They had been alien communications, the Xal'thorics coordinating their fleet movements. Humanity had known the invasion was coming before the Xal'thorics even arrived.
2 years ago, the world's governments had quietly begun preparing. The public knew nothing. The resources of Earth had been secretly diverted to a dozen hidden projects. The nuclear strikes, the scorched Earth tactics, the resistance, all of it was designed to buy time, to distract, to make the aliens believe that humanity was fighting a conventional war.
They weren't.
How long until they initiate the cleansing protocol? Chen asked.
Based on their communication patterns, approximately 72 hours.
Then we need to accelerate the timeline. Chen looked at the displays surrounding him, the hidden weapons, the secret projects, the desperate gambles that represented humanity's only chance at survival. Notify all resistance cells. Operation Prometheus begins in 24 hours.
Vorthax was on the command deck when the first ship exploded.
What was that? He demanded, as alarm screamed across the bridge.
The inevitable conquest, sir. Xal'thor's voice cracked with panic. She's just gone. Internal explosion, origin unknown. Sabotage? That's impossible. There are no humans aboard our vessels.
Not sabotage, Fleet Commander. The explosion originated in the engine room. Something triggered a cascade failure in the fusion core. Before Xal'thor could say more, another explosion lit up the view screen. Then another. Then another.
What is happening? Vorthax roared.
We don't know, sir. Ships are exploding across the fleet. We're receiving reports, some kind of signal, a broadcast on a frequency we've never encountered. It's doing something to our systems.
The humans had spent 3 years studying the intercepted Xal'thoric's communications. They had reverse-engineered enough of the alien technology to understand one crucial vulnerability. The Xal'thoric's fusion reactors were controlled by a central computer system that responded to specific command codes. The codes were supposed to be unbreakable, impossible for any primitive species to decipher. But human cryptographers had spent centuries breaking codes. They had built entire fields of mathematics around the art of finding patterns in chaos. And when faced with an existential threat, they had dedicated the full computing power of Earth to a single task. Now, from 100 hidden satellites disguised as debris, the signal was broadcasting. It was a shutdown command, transmitted directly into the heart of every Xal'thoric's vessel in Earth orbit. And instead of a graceful shutdown, someone had modified the code to trigger a cascade failure.
The Xal'thoric's fleet was tearing itself apart. "Shields!" Vorthax screamed. "All power to shields! Block that signal!" "We can't, sir. It's on a frequency we've never protected against. It's bypassing every defense we have." Vorthax watched in horror as the Eternal Dominion began to shake. Somewhere in the bowels of his flagship, the fusion reactor was beginning to destabilize.
Emergency evacuation, he ordered. All hands to escape pods.
He had conquered 17 worlds. He had never lost a single vessel to enemy action. Now, in the space of minutes, he was about to lose everything.
As he ran for the escape pods, a single thought consumed him. How? How had these primitive, backwards, irrational creatures done this? How had they turned his greatest weapons against him?
He would never know the answer. The Eternal Dominion exploded 3 seconds before he reached the pod bay, vaporizing Fleet Commander Vorthax along with 10,000 other Xal'thor's officers.
On the surface of Earth, humans emerged from their tunnels and bunkers to watch the sky burn.
Lieutenant Commander Wells stood on a hill overlooking the ruins of Denver, her squad gathered around her, staring up at the cascade of explosions lighting up the heavens. The Xal'thor's fleet was dying, thousands of vessels detonating in a chain reaction of fire and light.
"Did we do this?" Private Torres asked, his voice hushed with wonder. "Did we actually do this?"
"We did," Wells said quietly. "All of us. Everyone who fought. Everyone who resisted. Everyone who refused to give up."
Debris began to rain from the sky, pieces of alien ships burning through the atmosphere, drawing bright lines of fire across the heavens. It was beautiful and terrible, a funeral pyre for an empire that had thought itself invincible.
But Wells knew the war wasn't over. Not yet. There were still Xal'thors on the ground, thousands of them, scattered across the planet, cut off from their fleet and their command structure. Some would surrender. Others would fight to the death.
And somewhere out there, somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the Xal'thor's hegemony still existed. They would learn what had happened here. They would send more fleets, more soldiers, more weapons. Humanity had won a battle, but the war was just beginning.
In the ruins of New York, in a reinforced bunker beneath what had once been the United Nations headquarters, President Martinez addressed the survivors of Earth.
3 months ago, an alien fleet appeared in our skies. They gave us a choice: surrender or die. They believed we would choose survival. They believed we would value our lives over our freedom. They believed we would bow to their power and accept our place as slaves.
She paused, looking into the camera. They were wrong.
Today, the Xal'thor's 6th Conquest Fleet is no more. 3,000 vessels destroyed. Hundreds of thousands of enemy soldiers defeated. Not by some miracle, not by some secret weapon, but by the combined will of every human being on this planet.
We did not win because we were stronger. We did not win because we were more advanced. We won because we refused to give up. We won because we would rather destroy our own cities than see them conquered. We won because every single person who picked up a weapon and fought, who sheltered a soldier, who risked their life to resist, believed that freedom was worth dying for.
The Xal'thors made a mistake when they came to Earth. They studied our technology and saw a primitive species. They studied our military and saw an inferior force. But they didn't study our history. They didn't study our culture. They didn't study our hearts.
If they had, they would have known. They would have known that humans do not surrender. We did not surrender to the darkness when our ancestors huddled in caves. We did not surrender to nature when plagues and famines threatened to wipe us out. We did not surrender to tyrants when armies of oppression marched across our lands. And we will not surrender to invaders, no matter how powerful, no matter how advanced, no matter how inevitable our defeat may seem.
To the Xal'thor's hegemony, wherever you are, hear this. We know you're coming. We know you'll send more fleets, more soldiers, more weapons. We don't care. We will fight you on every planet, in every system, until our last breath. And if you think that what you saw today was the best humanity can do, you are even more foolish than your fleet commanders.
We are humanity. We do not surrender. We do not submit. We do not give up.
And we are coming for you.
The broadcast ended. Across the shattered remains of Earth, 8 billion survivors, scattered, bloodied, but unbowed, looked up at the stars and began to prepare for the next battle.
In the 5 years following the destruction of the 6th Conquest Fleet, humanity changed. The old divisions, nations, religions, ethnicities didn't disappear, but they became secondary to a new identity. They were Terrans now, children of Earth, survivors of the first invasion, and they were preparing for the second.
General Chen, now chairman of the Terran Defense Council, oversaw the reconstruction of Earth's industrial capacity. But they weren't rebuilding the old world. They were building something new. Captured Xal'thor's technology was reverse-engineered and improved. Human scientists, working with salvaged alien databases, made breakthroughs that would have taken centuries under normal circumstances. Fusion power, faster-than-light communication, shield generators, plasma weapons.
And ships, hundreds of ships, being constructed in orbital facilities that grew larger with each passing month.
The first fleet will be operational within the year, Chen reported to the Terran Council. 100 vessels, each incorporating the best of human and Xal'thor's technology, crewed by volunteers who've been training for 5 years.
Will it be enough? Asked Councilwoman Vasquez, the former Secretary General.
No, Chen admitted. The hegemony has thousands of fleets, millions of ships, billions of soldiers. In a straight fight, we'd lose.
Then why are we building them?
Because we're not going to fight straight. Chen pulled up a holographic display of the galaxy. The hegemony has conquered 47 species, 47 civilizations held in bondage. The word of what happened here has spread to every one of them. They know that the hegemony can be beaten. They're waiting for someone to show them how.
You want to start an uprising?
I want to finish one. The hegemony's strength is its unity, a single command structure, a single doctrine, a single way of thinking. That's also its weakness. They don't know how to fight a war on multiple fronts against enemies who don't play by their rules. Chen smiled grimly. But we do. We've been fighting those kinds of wars for all of recorded history.
So we're going to export guerrilla warfare to the entire galaxy?
We're going to do better than that. We're going to teach every oppressed species in the hegemony what the Xal'thor's never understood about us, what they never could understand.
Vasquez raised an eyebrow. And what's that?
That surrender is never the only option. That hope is a weapon. That one person standing up and saying no can change the universe. Chen looked at the star map, at the hundreds of worlds marked as hegemony territory. The Xal'thor's ruled through fear. They convinced everyone that resistance was impossible, so no one ever tried. But now everyone knows it's possible, because we showed them.
The Terran First Fleet emerged from hyperspace on the outskirts of the Xal'thor system, a mining world where 300 million slaves of various species labored to extract precious metals for the hegemony. Captain James Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Tess Defiance, watching the Xal'thor's patrol ships scrambling to respond to the unexpected intrusion.
Signal the fleet, he ordered. All ships, implement Operation Liberator.
100 Terran vessels moved in perfect coordination, but they didn't engage the Xal'thor's defenders, not directly. Instead, they began broadcasting.
The message went out on every frequency, in every language spoken by the slave species of the hegemony.
This is the Terran First Fleet. We are humans, the species that destroyed the 6th Conquest Fleet. We are not here to conquer you. We are here to free you. If you want to fight, we will arm you and train you. If you want to flee, we will take you to safety. And if you want to hide and wait for a better moment, we understand that too. But know this, the hegemony is not invincible. They can be beaten, they can be hurt, and someday soon, they can be destroyed. Rise up, fight back. You are not alone anymore. On the surface of Xal'thor, in the depths of the mining complexes, slaves who had never known hope began to look at each other with new eyes.
And then they began to rise. It started slowly. A riot in a mining complex, a sabotaged production facility, an assassination of a hegemony overseer. But it spread like wildfire. The Terran First Fleet moved through the outer territories of the hegemony, never staying long enough for the main fleets to catch them, always broadcasting their message of hope and resistance. They left behind weapons, training manuals, communication devices. They established secret networks of resistance fighters. They showed the oppressed peoples of the galaxy that the hegemony could bleed.
Within a year, uprisings had broken out on 30 worlds. Within 2 years, entire sectors were in open revolt. The hegemony, which had never faced coordinated resistance, found itself fighting a war on 100 fronts and losing ground on all of them.
"This is impossible," declared High Hegemon Valtrix, supreme ruler of the hegemony, as he reviewed the latest battle reports. "We have conquered 47 species. None of them ever resisted like this. What has changed?"
His advisors exchanged nervous glances. Finally, one of them spoke.
The humans, High Hegemon, they've changed everything.
The humans are one species, one primitive, backward species from an insignificant world. How can they be responsible for all of this?
They're not fighting alone, High Hegemon. They're teaching others to fight. Every world they visit, they leave behind trained insurgents, weapons, and something more dangerous than either.
What? Hope? They're giving our slaves hope. And once a slave begins to hope, they stop being a slave.
The High Hegemon stared at the tactical display, at the dozens of systems flashing red with rebellion. Then we must destroy them, all of them, the humans and every species they've corrupted. Mobilize every fleet. We will crush this rebellion and restore order to the galaxy.
High Hegemon, if we mobilize every fleet, we'll leave the core worlds defenseless.
The core worlds have never been attacked. No enemy has ever reached them.
The advisor hesitated. With respect, High Hegemon, no enemy has ever been like the humans.
Captain Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the TES Defiance, looking at the holographic display that showed the massed fleets of the hegemony.
10,000 ships, the largest armada in the history of the galaxy, assembled to crush the rebellion once and for all.
Behind Okonkwo, the combined forces of free humanity and their allies, 15 species who had thrown off the yoke of the hegemony, waited in formation. 2,000 ships in total, a fraction of the enemy force.
"Captain," reported Lieutenant Chen, no relation to the general, though she had chosen the name in his honor. "The enemy fleet is approaching. They'll be in weapons range in 10 minutes.
Good, Okonkwo smiled. That means we're in range too.
Sir, the enemy has 10,000 ships. We have 2,000. In a straight fight, they would annihilate us. He turned to face his bridge crew, humans and aliens alike, united in their determination to be free. But we're not going to fight straight. We never have. Signal the fleet. Implement Operation Ragnarok.
The 2,000 ships of the Allied fleet broke formation, not charging toward the enemy, but scattering in every direction. Some dove toward the hegemony formation. Others swung wide, arcing around to attack from unexpected angles. Still others hung back, forming a defensive screen. And then the missiles launched. Millions of them, from every ship in the fleet, streaking toward the enemy in a vast cloud of death. But they weren't ordinary missiles. They were loaded with the same code that had destroyed the 6th Conquest Fleet, upgraded, refined, and enhanced by a decade of human innovation. And each one was designed to penetrate hegemony shields and deliver its payload directly into the heart of enemy vessels. The hegemony fleet's shields had been upgraded since the first battle. They could block the signal now, filter it out before it reached their systems.
But they couldn't block 10 million missiles simultaneously.
The first wave was destroyed. So was the second, and the third. But the fourth wave got through, and the fifth, and the sixth. Ships began to explode across the hegemony formation. Not as many as in the first battle. Their defenses were better now, but enough. Enough to cause chaos. Enough to break their formation. Enough to create openings.
And the Allied fleet poured through those openings.
their smaller, more maneuverable ships tearing into the disorganized hegemony forces. Human tactics, refined through thousands of years of warfare, combined with alien technology and the desperate determination of slaves fighting for their freedom.
The battle lasted for 6 hours. When it was over, the hegemony fleet was shattered, not destroyed entirely, but broken beyond any possibility of victory. The surviving ships retreated, fleeing toward the core worlds with the Allied fleet in pursuit.
On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Okonkwo watched the enemy run.
"Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "We're not done yet. Today we broke their fleet. Tomorrow we break their empire."
The hegemony fell not in a single moment, but gradually, world by world, system by system.
The core worlds held out for 3 years, protected by the remnants of the Great Fleet and the desperate determination of a ruling class that knew they would receive no mercy from the species they had enslaved. But in the end, even they fell. High Hegemon Valtrix was captured alive, the only hegemony leader to be taken prisoner. He stood before the first session of the Galactic Congress, a body representing 52 free species, and demanded to know how this had happened, how his invincible empire had been brought down by primitives, how 12,000 years of hegemony rule had been undone in less than 2 decades. The human representative, Elena Vasquez, now over 80 years old, but still sharp-minded and determined, rose to answer him. "You made a mistake," she said simply. "The same mistake tyrants have made throughout human history. You thought that power was about weapons, about ships, about superior technology and overwhelming force." She walked toward him, her footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. "But power isn't about any of those things. Power is about will. The will to fight when victory seems impossible. The will to hope when hope seems foolish. The will to stand up and say no when everyone tells you to accept your fate." She stopped in front of him, looking up at the crystalline face of the being who had once ruled an empire spanning half the galaxy.
"You conquered 47 species because they believed you were invincible. They believed resistance was futile. They believed they had no choice but to surrender."
And then you came to Earth, and we taught you, and we taught them, that surrender is always a choice, that there is always another option, that the only true defeat is giving up.
She turned to address the full Congress, raising her voice so that everyone could hear.
"The hegemony fell because one species refused to surrender. One species stood up and said no. One species showed the galaxy that the invincible empire could bleed." And that's the thing about hope. Once you give it to people, you can never take it away. Because even if you kill everyone who believes, their belief survives them. It spreads to others. It grows and grows until nothing can stop it.
She turned back to Valtrix.
You thought you could conquer the galaxy by making everyone afraid of you. But you can't rule through fear forever, because eventually someone will refuse to be afraid. And once that happens, your empire is already dead. It just doesn't know it yet.
Valtrix had no answer. There was nothing to say. He had spent his entire life believing that power came from strength, that the strong conquered the weak, and that was the natural order of the universe.
He had never understood that the weak could refuse to be weak, that they could choose to fight even when fighting seemed impossible, that the universe's true natural order was not domination, but the endless, irrepressible drive of living things toward freedom.
He had never understood humans.
And by the time he did, it was too late. Epilogue: The Legacy.
100 years after the fall of the hegemony, a human historian named Dr. Sarah Wells Chen published a comprehensive history of the conflict titled "They Thought We Would Surrender." The book opened with a quote from an ancient human philosopher. "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety
deserve neither liberty nor safety.
And it ended with a new quote, words that had become the motto of the Galactic Congress, inscribed on monuments and memorials across 52 worlds.
Humanity never surrendered. Neither should you.
Dr. Wells Chen was the great-great-granddaughter of Lieutenant Commander Sarah Wells, who had fought in the ruins of Denver, and General Marcus Chen, who had orchestrated Operation Prometheus. She had grown up hearing stories of the invasion, of the resistance, of the desperate struggle for survival.
But the story that stayed with her most was the simplest one.
It was the story of the moment when the Xal'thor had demanded surrender, and humanity had responded with a single word.
No.
That one word had changed the course of galactic history. It had inspired billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. It had brought down an empire that had stood for 12,000 years. And it had shown the universe something that the hegemony had never understood, something that humans had always known, deep in their bones, from the moment their ancestors first stood upright on the African plains and looked up at the stars.
That the universe does not belong to the strong.
It belongs to those who refuse to give up.
The end.